All right, welcome everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute here. I want to allow people to get settled in. And we always have some people showing up after a couple of minutes, so I'd hate for them to miss any of the presentation. But if they're going to miss it, it might as well be the time that I'm talking. So I'm going to try to talk quickly, get out of the way so we can get to the meat and the potatoes with our awesome presenters. So hello, my name is David Hungerford. I'm a senior advisor with SVN, Saunders, Ralston, Dantzler. We are the largest provider of commercial brokerage services in the Lakeland Winter Haven MSA and have a presence throughout all of Central Florida. And today we're going to be talking about industrial real estate and specifically the impacts that we've experienced due to coronavirus COVID-19. And what does it look like now? Where do we think it's going? And we've got three awesome presenters here with me today. Bob Krueger from Brennan Investment Group, Brandon Clark from the Ruthvens here in Lakeland, and Rob Richter from McCraney out of Orlando. All right, so just to set the stage a little bit, we all know that the different real estate sectors, those four major food groups, they're all affected differently by coronavirus. And this little chart here is from TREP, just talking about the CMBS delinquencies that have been experienced in the past several months. You can see in the chart, and we've got the color-coded legend there. You know, how has industrial been affected? Office, retail. You can see industrial, perhaps not surprisingly, very low delinquency rate, looks almost unaffected throughout this whole process, whereas lodging, those hotels, hospitality, they've been impacted pretty heavily with these stay-home orders. So not every sector has been affected the same. And perhaps if we looked at this on a spectrum of, okay, where were we and where are we now? Is it worse? Is it the same? Is it better? On the far end of the spectrum, the worst, hospitality has really suffered. Entertainment, your sporting venues, your movie theaters that have been closed down, those people have been hit very hard throughout this. And of course, senior housing, the population that's been primarily affected by the disease, those assets are having some trouble. I had a contract with a senior housing developer that very quickly fell apart because they had no idea how this was going to impact them both short-term or long-term. Somewhere in the middle, we've got retail and office. We know it's going to be impacted. We still don't exactly know what's going to happen. Are people going to be working from home? Are they going to be going to the office? Do they have to remain 6 feet apart? What is that going to look like? So some of that is still developing. Apartments, probably hasn't changed as much as some of those sectors. And of course, on the far end of the spectrum, we've got industrial and self-storage. Have they been impacted at all? Is it better? We'll see. Just a couple of stats, some research done by CBRE in the past few months. There's a new need for about 400 to 500 million square feet of warehouse distribution space, according to CBRE. And their comment on that is that consumer behaviors have changed. There's more adaptation of e-commerce and those delivery services. And so the supply chain's different, more inventory. We're going to need more space to house those things that are being shipped to our homes. And also, cold storage space. You can thank those food delivery companies for the additional food storage need, the cold storage need, the Grubhubs and our Publixes and Walmarts. And so today you're going to hear from three different gentlemen that are positioned throughout the I-4 corridor. We've got Bob in Tampa, Brandon in Lakeland, and Rob over in Orlando. So we're just going to go left to right. I'm going to go ahead and turn over the floor to Bob Krueger. Bob, if you would just say hello, introduce yourself, and we are getting going.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to be a part of this panel. Wish we could do this in person, but this is the next best thing. So I'm Bob Krueger. I'm the managing principal for Brennan Investment Group. My main focus for Brennan is in the state of Florida, and more specifically the I-4 corridor. Brennan Investment Group, for those unfamiliar, was started in 2010. We're active in all things industrial. That includes, we do a lot of spec development, build-to-suits, expansions, single-tenant, net lease properties, multi-tenant portfolios. So basically, we look at ourselves as someone that provides integrated industrial solutions to our customers. Throughout the country, we have 46 million square feet. We're in 30 states, 10 offices, 900 tenants, and 448 buildings. So we got, relative to things that are going on the industrial side, we have a pretty good handle. So basically, okay.
Is it working, Bob?
Yeah, trying to get the next slide here. It's not working, David.
That's what happens when we got 4 salesmen trying to run the technology here.
Yeah, all right.
All
There
right.
we go. Great. So one of our big projects is the Centerstate Logistics Park. Go to the next slide here.
I'll just run it until I can figure this out, Bob. Sorry.
Okay, that's great. So basically, we have our Centerstate Logistics Parks West, okay? And that consists of 2 buildings. Our first building was 605,000 square feet. We leased it to Quaker Pepsi. They use it as their main distribution facility for Gatorade and Aquafina water. The property is located just north on Interstate 4 and Highway 33. You know, state-of-the-art cross-dock facility, 36-foot clear height. Interesting enough, the whole facility is air-conditioned, LED lighting. So go to the next slide here. Oh, there we got it. So within the same park, then we recently completed 440,000 square foot distribution facility, and made kind of an easy deal for Quaker to expand right into that facility. They just moved in on June 1st on 440,000 square feet. Same type of building. It's all air conditioned, state of the art, LED lighting. It's interesting that their dock packages are like the state of the art. Their dock packages run like, you know, over $100,000 a piece. So they have pretty high specs there. And this new facility, they also are doing distribution for Gatorade and Aquafina water, but also now they're doing Quaker Oats. So the new model is do multiple product lines in the same facility, which is great, because that means that as they do that, needs bigger facilities, and they'll need hopefully more of them, and rather than having each division have their own distribution facilities in different locations. And I want to thank Colliers, who did the leasing on both these facilities. So just up the road from there, the next slide would be Centerstate East. We can move down to the next slide. So Centerstate East basically is a little over 1.5 million square feet. Our first building that we're a speculative building that you see kind of highlighted in kind of a green color, 1,011,697 square feet. We have over a mile of frontage on I-4, and we hope to break ground here in the next couple of weeks. So we're pretty excited about that. Next slide. So I'm going to play a little video that will give you a different perspective of of the park. There you can see the buildings located on the site, and a great central Florida location. You can see between Tampa and Orlando, right in the center. And by the way, we want to thank Ruthvens for selling us the property. Thank you very much, Brandon. We have 164 acres. You can see the frontage on Interstate 4, over a mile. You know, all the typical features that we have relative to the wonderful location of being in Central Florida. And as we kind of spin around here, you can kind of see our Centerstate West. As we swing around to Interstate 4, you'll see we'll get then to University Parkway Boulevard, and then as we continue the swing, then you'll see Polytech University right across from our property. So that's kind of our latest, 1 million square foot specs. Pretty aggressive. We're really excited about it. And as CBRE said, if you need 400 to 500 million square foot of space shortage, we got at least 1 million. We can take care of that. So that's kind of gives you what we're doing in Central Florida right now.
There you go. Perfect. 1 million square feet at a time. All right. There's Bob's contact information and his team as well. And if you'll hold your questions, we're going to open up to Q&A from with all of our panelists at the end of their introductions. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Brandon.
Great. Thanks, David. And thanks, Bob. You're welcome on the land. We're excited to see you guys break ground and get going on that. It's going to be an exciting project. So I'm Brandon Clark. I'm with the Ruthvens. I oversee new development as well as do a lot with leasing, property management, all of our financing and other functions. Been with the Ruthvens for about 2 years, and prior to that was a corporate banker. We have we've got a long history in Lakeland. We've been in business here for 63 years. In 2020, our founder, Joe P. Ruthven, really pioneered spec warehouse development in Lakeland, and that's done a lot for the growth and the business development of the Lakeland community over the decades. We currently have 87 buildings that totals 3.8 million square feet. All of that is within 15 minutes of our office in downtown Lakeland. Given we own the property, handle the leasing, handle the property management, it's really nice to be in a place like Lakeland where you can have that scale of product and diversity of product in such a tight radius. All right, David, you can flip on. So I'll walk through two projects and then pass it on to Rob. This is a project that we finished in late 2019, came online in November. This was the first phase. So as you can see, about 330,000 square feet across two buildings. We'll eventually in phase two add a 100,000 foot dock-high building in the middle. This first phase has gone really well. We've fully leased the rear building to two tenants. And one was an existing tenant that expanded with us, and then the other one was new. The front building we have 4 tenants in currently. 2 of them are manufacturers, 2 are distribution, and we still have space for rent there. The minimums available in the front are down to 7,200 square feet. So that building is very similar to a lot of our products where it can be divisible down to really small increments, and that really helps a lot of the smaller companies or companies that are opening up a new presence in Central Florida. Do so on a smaller footprint at first, and this product, as you can see, is located right off of that same exit that Bob's projects are, and we like to refer to that exit from time to time as the interchange that Bob built, because he's been building around that interchange for several years now, several decades. You can flip to the next one, David. So this is an interesting project, not our normal spec development. We had a building at 4760 Gateland Drive, which is off of County Line Road, so on the opposite side of Lakeland towards Tampa. And that building got, as you can see in the top picture, got annihilated pretty good by a tornado in the fall. And so we've been working on cleaning that up, and now have panels formed, rebar laying in this week, and are getting started on the reconstruction. You can flip to the next page. So it kind of gives us a neat. This building was built in 2006, so it's not that old, but it gives us a neat opportunity to enhance a couple of things. We had in that time in between had bought the land next to it, so we're doing a couple of things as we rebuild this. It's 104,000 feet, 26,000 foot minimums, and 200 feet deep with a 24 clear height. We're adding a second entrance, so we've got kind of entrances on both sides of the truck court. We're adding a paved outside storage area as you come in that southwest entrance to the truck court, and then we've got three additional acres on the east side that we can do as lay down yard or truck parking or anything kind of outside storage. So gives us the ability to have a lot of flexibility in this property where we can work with tenants that may need a little bit more outside area around the building. So we've already had a decent amount of interest in this building, and I think it'll come online in the fourth quarter, and I think that timing should work out pretty well. You can go to the next one, Dave. We as I mentioned earlier, we're full service, located here in Lakeland, all of our products here in Lakeland, and handle everything from owning the buildings to leasing and property management. We're long-term holders. We sell buildings from time to time, but most of that is typically to tenants that want to purchase. So we really drive a lot of value through that over time, and drive and pass that along to tenants as well. Helping them keep their CAM charges down, and that serves them well. The last thing I'll add is one of our core tenants is having the opportunity for our tenants to be able to expand with us at any time, and having 3.8 million square feet and always developing something new gives us the ability to keep up our end of that bargain. So thanks for the time. Look forward to questions at the end.
All right, great. And we've got Rob. Sorry, Rob. Rob, is your mic working?
Sorry about that, guys. So thanks for having me. Rob Richter, I'm the Director of Leasing and Acquisitions for McCraney Property Company. And a little bit about us, and I'll talk more about sort of how we see the I-4 corridor in our current and sort of near future with everything that's happening in the markets. We have projects from Tampa, Plant City, and Orlando. So we really focus on the whole I-4 corridor. The company was founded a little over 30 years ago by Stephen McCraney. And during that 30-plus year tenure, the headquarters have been in West Palm. And one testament to our belief, and sort of an objective belief, I think, in many regards, to the future of Central Florida. Our headquarters just this year moved to Central Florida. So all of our senior management is now in Orlando. So what drives some of our decision making is following population trends and population growth areas. So if you see on the screen sort of the Atlanta Sunbelt area and the South Florida, Central Florida belt areas, that's how, when we look at a macro, where we think we would like to locate our projects. So if you see those growth areas that I mentioned there, it's precisely where we've been building, particularly over just this cycle since around 2011. Pre-2009, we were only operating in South Florida and Central Florida. And so we've really grown the footprint into a Southeast Sunbelt population-oriented play, which has worked out very well for us. So focusing on those dynamics and considering what drives growth in our industry is this e-commerce trend. So looking at some of the trends before, let's say, COVID-19, and how they've affected since COVID-19. So probably don't need to bore everybody with the fact that e-commerce and what Amazon has done has really changed the way that people shop. And one of the effects of that is it also changed the way that people work, from being retail workers to being warehouse workers. And so it changes the way that urban planners and cities start to view the industrial product. I think we all know that for most of our careers, we've been the ugly stepchild that gets put behind a landfill or stuck way off of the main highway. But with e-commerce, these warehouses that we develop are now employment centers, commerce centers. It's where people are getting their retail. More and more, it's where people are getting their food. And so our products have moved closer and closer to the rooftops. And that trend is something that has really driven our whole industry since the 2009 recession, 2008, 2009. And before COVID, e-commerce was growing at about 12 to 14% a year, and it represented about 11% of retail. So say that again, about a 12% annual growth and about 11% of retail. Since April, the growth has jumped to 20%, and in the month of May, e-commerce made up 20% of retail. So in a 30-day period, it went from 11 to 20%. Now, that 20%, some of that will go away when stores open up, but a lot of that is going to have a stickiness to it. And so we sort of believe that what COVID has done is that it has accelerated some of the trends that were already fundamentally changing the investment grade and the location and the design of our buildings in the first place. We've probably accelerated that by 1, 2, maybe 3 years. When you look at the Amazon effect, if you will, Amazon is leasing currently between 1 and 1.2 million square feet of warehouse space every single week. They're doing north of 52 million square feet, 55 million plus square feet of newly leased warehousing. And you sort of have Amazon, it's almost like the Burger King and McDonald's, where Burger King's real estate strategy was simply to say, well, where is McDonald's? Let me locate next to them because they've probably figured it out and we need to be able to compete. And you see that a lot of that with Amazon, and now your Walmarts and other large retailers are catching up quickly. And that sort of, call it warehousing arms race, and the increasing and now rapidly increasing demand on e-commerce has really positioned our entire industry to continue to see compressing cap rates, increasing lease rates. And another component of this COVID is that unemployment has gone up so much, and it's driven this acceleration of e-commerce that we're hopeful, this is a to be seen, but we're hopeful that communities may be more amenable to the warehouse developments coming in because of the job creation, particularly in this high unemployment environment. So we really do believe that, and I've told some folks, in a sense, I almost feel guilty that our whole industry stands the potential, if we haven't already seen it, to actually benefit from some of the ramifications of COVID. So with that in mind, I'll look at a few of our projects across I-4. This is a project that we have in Ocoee, which is northwest Orange County. We do our best to follow the idea that industrial is the new retail. So we try to build high finish industrial that has a curb appeal similar to a retail center with regard to landscaping, paint, and general architectural design. This project in the upper right corner, you can see there's 2 buildings that we delivered. We are 100% leased on both of those buildings, and we were leased within about 4 months of CO. So those leased very quickly. They're each about 150,000 square feet. And the large vacant area, we have a 400,000 square foot cross dock that is coming online in August. So you can see the overall site plan there. And what's been very interesting, another observation that we've made on our side during this pandemic, is that certainly there's been some slowing of tenants that are touring the market because of social distancing. There's been some slowing in leasing, but most of that we've seen in the sort of sub 50, sub 100,000 square foot range. But there's been a flurry of activity in the 500,000 to 1 million square foot. And the way that I think that is working itself out is that these large companies that are following that Amazon effect that I mentioned, if a company needs a 700,000 square foot warehouse to keep their business going, they have to get that done. Whereas a company that maybe is in 30,000 square feet thinking of expanding to 40, they could probably sit tight and see how the COVID pandemic plays out. So we've actually seen an uptick in the big box activity, which I think is a result of the fact that you just can't stop that moving train regardless of what's happening in the market. So we're excited to have a project that can house a big box. And in fact, we wish it could be 100 or 200,000 square feet bigger. I think that's also a new trend in Central Florida, is that a 500,000 square foot box is not necessarily massive like it used to feel like maybe even just 3 or 4 years ago. So the need for those big spaces is growing. And I think, again, this current market that we're in is accelerating those trends. Infinity Park is in John Young Parkway in Orlando. This is sort of an urban infill type project. We are partnered with Tavistock Development. They've owned this land, and there's a retail, hotel, office component in the front that Tavistock is developing. And on the back, we're putting up about 1.3 million square feet of industrial space. The first 5 buildings you see in the aerial on the bottom left were delivered, and we are about 70% leased across around 530,000 square feet. And so we'll be looking to move into phase 2 and building some more buildings there. We've had a lot of good success with Infinity. The demand for being close to rooftops as well as close to the theme parks in Orlando, a lot of service providers need that proximity. And so this project has done really well for us based on product style, and also certainly based on location. Our Plant City project, we have just over 1.35 million square feet. And we've been able to have success with lots of regional and some national companies coming into to Plant City. And for those that know Plant City well, a lot of those berry farms are now rooftops with industrial distribution. So Plant City has really been an advocate of the product type, and they see the value in the job creation. They see the value in that industrial certainly is in many regards the highest and best use for lots of these sites. And so all of us on this call have product up and down County Line Road, and this project is our project there. You can see the 4 building configuration there with we do still have some space available. And that's it for me. We also do, we purchased a building, 75,000 square foot building in Tampa on Madison Avenue, near the port of Tampa. And that's our sort of first foray into getting into the Tampa market. Tampa's a much tighter market on land just based on urban density. So poses some more challenges for ground up development based on that limited availability of land. And so we actually went in and purchased an asset and then remodeled it, and actually it turned out great, and we've got some good traction on it and a couple leases already as well. So those are our I-4 corridor footprint, and we're pretty optimistic about the immediate and midterm future here.
Great, thanks, Rob. So we are going to transition into Q&A. And take the control back away from Rob. So transition into Q&A, I've got some questions for you all that I'm going to fire away. And these are general questions for each of you, whoever would like to chime in. And then after we're done with those, we're going to open up to the floor. So first question, we talked a little bit about e-commerce and cold storage. How do you think consumer behaviors are going to adjust once we're past kind of these really hard effects of coronavirus? Are they going to, like you said, e-commerce is up to 20%. Are we going to stay there? Is there going to be some sort of meet in the middle? What are consumers how are they going to look once we get to the other side of this thing?
I'll jump in. I think Rob, you said it well, and it's kind of our view as well, which is, I think there's various trends that this just pulled forward, that we're 1, 2, 3, 5 years out. I speaking for myself and a lot of people that we talk to, those consumer trends around e-commerce are just probably going to be here to stay. Obviously, there's going to be some reduction in that when you can actually go to a store now, but it's I think a lot of convenience there is here to stay, and I think that there's people who may not have really done much in the form of e-commerce purchasing at all now had to, and so it just I think the pace of growth on that will sustain over the years to come as well.
Great, thanks, Brandon.
Yeah, one thing I've seen is Bob Krueger. It's not necessarily related to industrial, but the St. Pete Times had an article basically said they're trading traffic for chickens. Okay, basically, so the high-rise office buildings and people going into the downtowns are, they don't want to do that anymore. Okay, they're afraid that if they go back to work, this pandemic can happen again. They're moving out to the cities. They like working from home. They want to be closer to families and nature, and they don't want that close environment. So I think you may see a thing where on the smaller flex stuff with suburban office, the single-story stuff, surface parking. I think eventually you're going to see an increase in that as the people move out of the downtowns, and then they try to get space that is maybe less expensive. Instead of paying $35 a foot, they can get $15 a square foot and be more spread out and be more effective. So that's one thing that'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Okay, thanks. How about your tenants specifically? Do you have any tenants who are currently expanding due to this additional interest in e-commerce?
So I'll take a crack. This is Rob again from McCraney. So at the front end of COVID, for probably the first 60 days, we saw a lot of tenants come to market looking for short-term, even down 6 months, 12 months, 18-month type parts. And I think, part of that was some degree panic. Oh no, this is happening. We need to get a bunch of product. We need to move. And it's challenging, as most of us know, to do a 6-month term on a deal or 12-month term. So a lot of those quick expansions or quick short requirements, I think actually I didn't see a lot of those deals get done. What I saw was sort of our customers take a deep breath and say, okay, realistically, how does this affect me over a 36-month period, right? The PPP loans that came in helped tamper some of that panic, I think. So what we've actually experienced is that the transactions that we're working on are less related to a COVID issue and more sort of saying, okay, we're going to do business as usual, but maybe they are taking a slightly, instead of taking 50,000 square feet, they're looking for 55 or 60 in order to hold a little more inventory or build a slightly larger office is really what we're seeing. They're saying, look, I was going to have 1,500 square feet of office with my 20 employees, but I want to have 2,500 square feet. So they make up for that office space with maybe one more bay and leasing. But a lot of the panic type of expansion has really calmed down over the last 30 days.
Yeah, for us, like in the quicker facilities, as they were going through the pandemic, the Gatorade they could not keep up the inventory for the Gatorade. It was just flying off the shelves like they've never seen before. It was like almost a panic city. So basically, we're just seeing a lot of distribution facilities, and you'll see it in the future too, is the need for increased inventory levels to counter the shortages that could come up relative to some kind of disaster, be it hurricanes or pandemics, whatever. So you're seeing a lot of people, on the medical supply side and prevention gear, et cetera. They're expanding to kind of prepare for those type of things and expanding their inventory. And I think the other thing too is some of the manufacturing and stuff is going to come back relative to the political issues coming back to the United States, and that's going to also there's going to be more demand for the industrial space to those issues.
Okay, thanks, Bob. All right, similar question. Are any of your tenants, those companies, looking to increase their cold storage space, or do you have new tenants coming looking for cold storage?
It's Brandon at the Ruthvens. I'll take it real quick. We haven't really seen an increase in that over what we would normally see relative to COVID. We don't think it's been more just kind of normal course activity, and we have several companies that we're talking to at any given time that have either just ACing the warehouse or actual cold storage, but nothing that's been specifically driven by kind of the trend of and the theory around much more distribution of grocery and cold grocery items directly. So not really something we've seen as of yet.
Okay.
And just to tag along with that, all three of our organizations, if I'm not mistaken, are really driven by spec development, and cold storage is very cost prohibitive to build on spec. So at least with our sort of business model, it's a little challenging to build it until somebody comes in and requests it. And those requests are typically long lead items where those requirements are in the works for a year plus. So yeah, just to caveat on that, I haven't seen any big uptick there either.
Yeah, the cold storage facilities that we have, I agree, you can't do a speculative, but we've done a number of build-to-suits on the cold storage. We went up in New Hampshire for a chicken processor, and his business has just gone gangbusters. I mean, really, it's really increased significantly.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. So which of these terms, and maybe we've already answered this, but if you have anything to pile on, which of these trends do you see as short-term, and which would be more long-term trends?
Well, I think short-term.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, short-term, we're seeing a slowdown in new spec development. But that'll come back. Construction costs have lowered about that, which is good. About 1/3 of our construction product actually come from China, and the lumber costs are down like 14% year to date. But they're going to go up. And the other short-term thing we're seeing is on the debt side. It's interesting. The CMBS debt is slowed to almost nothing. Trying to get loans right now is really hard. Try to get a non-recourse loan, probably temporarily, they're just not there anymore. So that's kind of what we're seeing in short term, but it's going to change.
Yeah, I would say, one trend, and again, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. The three of our businesses, three of our collective market, and even, Rob years up into, the rest of the Southeast, I think are going to be net beneficiaries of increased, migration of, people from the urban centers in the North and Midwest South. And, I think Florida will obviously we were already passing it back to really high levels of net new residents, and Central Florida has been getting a disproportionate amount of that. And I think that's going to continue. I heard, I think it was another industrial webinar a couple of weeks ago that I was listening to, and their comment was areas around the country, especially in the South, where you could have more land, kind of to Bob's point, live, outside of a city, not live in an apartment or a condo, but still be relatively close to big city items, will be something that people probably drive more towards looking at, and especially as a lot more people feel comfortable that their jobs, them and their employers, that their jobs can be done remotely. It just will give a lot more flexibility. So I would think kind of over the medium to long term, we just continue to grow population wise in Central Florida.
Great. Thanks, Brandon. Now, do you see are there any, whether it be trends or just kind of crazy out of nowhere black swan events like coronavirus, that you think could have a serious impact on industrial real estate? Are there any threats out there that could kind of throw things out of whack?
There's a lot of threats out there. You got an election coming up. I'm not sure what that's going to do to the thing. You have the China tariffs. How much money is the government going to keep throwing in here? And then you've got the riots, and then you've got is COVID over with, or are we going to have another wave coming through? So these are all serious things that are potential on horizon that there's probably not a lot we can do about it, but you've got to be aware of it and kind of prepare for it.
And at a global level, sort of the past really 100 years of the world economy has been to become more of a global supply chain. And it seems like with all of the things that were just mentioned, that being less global might happen, where countries that can provide a great majority of the services themselves, such as the US or Brazil or China, may become less communicative with the world. And that could have impacts, both positive and negative, on how our industry is affected domestically. So I think that macro level of deglobalization could have some negative effects.
Interesting. Okay. Do you see any changes to your business model looking forward? How you guys operate and develop property?
Well, one thing that we're looking at now, more so, not that we didn't do before, but with the pandemic and everything that's going on, we're making a big run at sale leaseback. So corporations have a lot of money tied up in the real estate. They need, some short-term money to keep their business going. So you buy their facility from them and lease it back to them on a 10-year lease. So we're seeing a lot of those opportunities out there as a result of what's happened with the pandemic.
And with e-commerce, we're seeing that the building style and design, the customers are requesting differences. Substantial parking, transload type facilities, and some buildings that are not what we've built in the past. And I don't think we've arrived to the point where we're ready to build that type of product. Certainly not on spec, but I do believe that over the next few years, we all may see some significant changes in design to at least some of the building types that we build.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd say on our end, and I'll just add real quick. I mean, nothing crazy different that we're seeing at the moment. I think all of us are in a great spot to support continued growth of industrial across all different sizes, and we're seeing our kind of the demand for the leasing demand that we've seen since April has been pretty broad, down to 2,000 square foot ground level, 1,000 or 2,000 square foot ground level space up to 50,000 foot users. So I think from a lot of the trends that, to Rob's point, a lot of the trends that have been going on around e-commerce, or even just clear heights, and people looking at more density in their racking, those sorts of trends will continue. And I do agree with the trend that we'll probably see some evolution on how companies look at how much office build out they have in our warehouses.
Okay, great. And my final question before I open it to the floor, if you guys would just give me a quick sound bite. How are you feeling? Are you more optimistic or less optimistic looking forward into real estate spec development than you were at the beginning of the year?
I guess from our standpoint, we're pretty optimistic since I'm doing a 1 million square foot spec. So, yeah,
I hope so.
We're pretty bullish.
Yeah, I would say we were very optimistic in January, so it's almost hard to be more optimistic. But I would say we're as optimistic as we were, if not possibly more, just based on the growth dynamics of the industry and of Central Florida with that population growth that we were discussing. I think that drives our product type. So we are optimistic for sure.
Yeah, totally agree. We are as well. I think we take a really long-term view, and it's hard not to be with the overall, hard not to be optimistic with the overall trends. I think, the next couple months we expect to see, we wouldn't be surprised if there was, some continued pressure as people have been, burning through PPP funds and other support, probably liquidity and reserves that they have. And so we may, additionally, if we get a second spike or a little bit more of a less optimistic general economic mood, maybe there's a short-term contraction there, but we're still bullish on spec industrial.
Okay, great. Long-term optimism. So we're going to go ahead and pivot then to the audience Q&A. There should be a chat or Q&A feature that you can type out your questions to our panelists today. So let's go ahead and get that started. All right, I've got a question from Augie Schmidt, who's in our office at SVN. He asked if companies are participating in cold storage development. How much of a specialty product type is this? And how do you plan to capture the growth of this specific subsector?
Yeah, I'll answer. It's Brandon from the Ruthvens. I think same way that that was discussed earlier, where it's really not something that we're interested in doing on spec. We have some, and we've done it build to suit as needed. But I think that probably continues unless that trend becomes much more well developed. I don't know what Rob or Bob, if y'all want to add anything else.
No, we're the same too. I mean, it's a tough thing to do spec.
Yeah, and the other issue with these refrigerated spaces is when you turn them off for a period of time, there's no guarantees it turns back on. So you get real nervous with lease up or vacancy on an expensive piece of equipment like that. So you want to make sure that whoever comes in and uses it pays for it all before you have a second generation type space on your hands. So again, back to the sort of build to suit scenario to get it done.
So do you think cold storage shows up more on the user side than on the spec development side? Is that where we're seeing it more?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and it can obviously be, what we see a lot of times. I would say most of our tenants that have a cold storage need, they may have 15 to 20,000 feet, and their cold storage is 5. So it's really straightforward to do that inside of a traditional spec warehouse. If you're doing the entire facility, then it's a lot more straightforward to do it as a ground up build to suit.
Okay, thank you. And at the moment, I don't have any other Q&A questions. Hopefully everybody can figure out. It
looks like Eschenbach dropped a question in there for Bob.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, what? I saw it flash up and it went away, so I didn't catch the whole question.
I'll read it back to you just because I have it on my screen, so I'll intermediate here. It says, Bob, do you have any sense that Hillsborough County Commission will consider moving the urban service line eastward anytime soon?
That's a good question. Knowing the makeup of the current county commission, I have no idea what they're doing. It's pretty, they're kind of no growth type commissioners there right now, and so I don't know if they will or not. Wish I could give you the answer to that one, Bill. But sometimes I'm relative to Hillsborough County versus Polk County. If I had a choice of where do I want to go, I want to go to Polk County. Just easier to deal with.
Great. We're happy to have you. All right. We've got some more questions coming in. Hazel said the worst that COVID-19 did to any commercial deals has to do with financing. Are lenders financing in the industrial space? And are the requisites more stringent or lenient because of this new demand with e-commerce? Who are these lenders?
With the lenders on the e-commerce space, it's all institutional. Large insurance companies and they chase the Amazons of the world and do these deals. They work with preferred different contractors or developers. So these things are kind of a lot of repeat business with the same big institutional partners. And even on our spec stuff that we're doing, we have large institutional partners. That's the only way you can do these things. So.
Okay, Brandon, Rob, do you have anything different?
Yeah. I'll add in. Our scale is smaller than what Bob's doing, and business park scale smaller than a lot of Rob's recent projects as well. And we tend to do our financing not with institutional capital. We tend to do ours more with community banks and kind of some smaller regional banks. And we had a big flurry of refinancing that we did in March, and then we have some that we're continuing again from those kind of small regional and community banks. Currently we closed a loan last week on that tornado destroyed building that we're rebuilding and expanding and adding things onto. So it definitely seized up there for a couple months. We're seeing more appetite from the kind of local bank market starting to open back up, especially after they got done processing all the PPP loans. So. little positive there, and rates really gapped up for a little bit if you could get it, and then those are starting to compress back down some as well.
Great. Okay. Next question from Eric Ammon in our office. Eric says, thank you all for taking the time to do this with us. Just how big of a gorilla might Amazon become? Will they be able to drive rents down over time? And what does it cost per foot today to deliver product?
So I'll take a crack at it here. So the cap on Amazon's growth is far from me to know, but with regard to driving rents down, Amazon is not overly price sensitive. In fact, when they need to be in a location, with their parking requirements, they lease more space than they need to be able to park cars in a building or find additional parking. So they're less cost sensitive. And since they're driving so much of this activity that ripples around it, if anything, I think rents are on a standard trajectory up, or perhaps going up slightly faster because of the demand that not only Amazon has, but that it creates, and then the land starts disappearing and you get into sort of a classic supply and demand scenario. So, and I say that with the caveat that we have explored deals with Amazon, but we do not have them as a current tenant. So somebody with more experience, actually with them as a tenant might be able to speak more to that, but I don't see that driving prices down. And the second part of that is cost per square foot to deliver product. Tilt wall is rear load buildings are right around $50, $55 a foot in construction costs in our experience. And Bob and Brandon, you might have a different number there.
Yeah, that's pretty close. Yeah, about the same.
Okay, great. We've got another question from Augie Schmidt. Augie's question is for Bob. Bob, what types of cap rates are you seeing on the sale leaseback side with those local and regional industrial users who are occupying less than 200,000 square feet? Have you done any of those deals?
Yeah, the deals are all driven by the tenant and the term of the lease, and so it varies. We've seen some basically Class C stuff that maybe wasn't the best. You see some of the stuff going at 5.5% cap rates, but
wow.
They have a tenant in it. On the bigger stuff, I mean, when we did the first Quaker building, and Quaker was a great tenant, 600,000 square foot. Well, that cap rate was like 4.87, which was just unheard of at the time. Our second building here is going to be 5+ cap rate. So cap rates have kind of gone up somewhat, but it varies relative to the tenant, location, and the product.
So even your local tenant who's occupying C class, like you said, maybe more metal warehouse as opposed to tilt wall, you still see cap rates in that 5 to 6% range potentially.
Yes. There's so much money. There is still a lot of money out there, and industrial is still the flavor of the century, right? And everybody wants industrial. They like industrial. So they're willing to pay for it.
Great, awesome. All right.
Just as kind of a side note to that, and I don't know how the rest of you guys have been, but so we just went through one of the worst pandemics and things in our history, right? And our rent collections are still like 93, 94%. Okay, great. I mean, not that far from pre-COVID. It's industrial, so these tenants are surviving. They're paying their rents. You're not seeing that in retail and some of the other sectors. So industrial is pretty strong vehicle for investment, and a lot of people see it and they want to put their money there. When we do some deals high net worth, and I tell you, we got people just knocking down our doors, want to get in our deals.
Your rent collection metric is the same in our portfolio. Just for another data point there. Yep.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think
and for us as well.
go ahead, Brandon.
You know, it's kind of in that same thing. We have a little bit more of a skew towards smaller tenants than Bob and Rob do. So some of those have seen more pressure, and we've worked with all the tenants that have reached out that needed help. But overall, it's remained really pretty remarkably strong.
Great. Yeah, just to comment on what Bob was saying about some of these sale leasebacks. I think most of us are probably familiar with the cap rates on the Amazons and the PepsiCo type deals, but to hear that there's such strong numbers on the local regional players, I think is just great news and definitely displays a very strong industry. So we have just a couple of more minutes left if you guys want to get in any last questions and answers. Otherwise, we will go ahead and end our session. This session is being recorded, and we will most likely distribute it to all the attendees today, as well as post it to our website.
Good deal. Thank you all.
Thanks,
All
everyone.
right. If no further questions, we'll go ahead and
Guys.
dismiss. I just want to thank our participants today and thank all of you who attended. Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody.